Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you.
For the record.
Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
For the record. For the record.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning, and welcome to the program, whether you're here in the Cayman Islands or if you're listening overseas via the web. I'm Orit Connor, your host. I'm also known as OC. You're listening to a relatively new show on Radio Cayman 89.9 FM. It's For the Record, and it's on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It starts at 7:30 a.m. and runs until 9 a.m. For the Record is about giving you the latest information on important issues of the day, issues that may in some way affect you and your families, your businesses, or your jobs, if you have a job. For the Record is about you, and I want you to call me with anything that's on your mind. Are you worried about the budget and what effects it will have on your pocketbook? Are you worried that despite a budget of over $600 million that not enough money is being directed towards you and your communities? Call me on 1-800-534-8255 or email me at fortherecord, one word, fortherecord, at candw.ky. 1-800-534-8255 is a toll-free number. Now here on For the Record, we promised you that we would be giving you the opportunity to talk to policymakers, those who carry out the policies, other MLAs, and we are doing our endeavor to keep that promise to you. We expect to have in our studios again this morning the Leader of the Opposition, Honorable W. McKeever Bush. And while we await his departure, we will talk about several of the topics that we wish to discuss with him this morning and some of the questions that we will pose to him. We are aware of the fact that the Finance Committee is still continuing to meet on finalizing the various aspects of the budget. So we would also like to hear from Mr. Bush what has emerged from those Finance Committee meetings so far. We also see in today's headlines in the Compass, or not really the headline per se. The headline talks about the IRS and changes in offshore disclosure regime for those persons who hold U.S. citizenship and green cards. And I must honestly say that I'm not competent to really discuss that particular issue with you, but I'm sure that we, at some stage, hopefully earlier rather than later, we will have someone on the show who can discuss that with you and explain the ramifications and the effects that that change in U.S. policy or U.S. legislation will have on those of you who are U.S. citizens or U.S. residents. But we also see in one of the other topics in the Caymanian Compass today that the budget records are error-ridden. Now, I give that to you the way that it is printed in the newspaper, error-ridden. That could indicate that there are lots of errors in it as opposed to just small ones and sporadic ones within the budget. It'll be highly interesting to know about that and whether or not those errors in the budget have affected the bottom line and whether or not that changes the actual figures as it relates to revenues and expenditures for the Cayman Islands government in the financial year 2014-2015. I'm also aware that the Honorable Makiva Bush, when he was Minister for Social Services and Sports, was one person who initiated the whole regime in relation to social services. We know that in the past, let's say in the 60s and the 70s, the Social Services Department was focused more on truancy in schools, and we had lesser families or lesser numbers of families in the Cayman Islands who found themselves falling through the social safety net, as opposed to the Cayman Islands now, where we have over 55,000, a population of over 55,000, as opposed to in the 70s when we had a population of about 13,000. I recall when I was in university, the student body population was larger than the population of the Cayman Islands. So I know that Mr. Bush was instrumental in setting up programs that would assist those families that found themselves in need. And we're seeing more and more of that happening, at this point in time. Mr. Bush is in the studio now. I'm going to ask our engineer if we can go to a commercial break, play some music for you, and we will come back once we have Mr. Bush settled in, because we're also on camera this morning, and you can view the rebroadcast of this program on government's television station. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Good morning, and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor, also known as OC, and I have in the studios with me this morning the Honorable W. Makiva Bush, Leader of the Opposition, MLA from the District of West Bay, our first Premier in the Cayman Islands after the introduction of our 2009 Cayman Islands Constitution Order. I remind you that the phone lines will be open at 8 o'clock after the news for your calls to be taken. We want you to call us with any questions, any observations that you may have. We merely ask that you be respectful and courteous in your questioning and in any observations or any points that you're putting across to our guest here on For the Record. Mr. Bush, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, OC. I am sorry that I'm late. Was dealing with a very important matter in the district this morning, so I apologize for being late. There are many, as Whole Radio Cayman used to say, more questions than answers. But to say that this is not an interesting time in the Cayman Islands would be an understatement. Many things are going on that we're not getting answers for. In my time, they would say it's bad governance, that you not want to be accountable, and that it's corruption. Today, I said to the government yesterday, I wish I'd gone to the college they went to, because they certainly know how to find excuses and good sounding excuses. But that doesn't solve our problems. The headline today: IRS changed offshore disclosure regime. These are all matters that affect us. Yesterday's paper talked about, which was discussed in Finance Committee a bit, the matter that the UK announced wanting us to, any company, anyone that owns 25% of a company, to be able to, they must register at a central registry, which the whole world knows there about the business. That I must remind everyone, is a step in the opposite direction from what this country's foundation is all about in our financial services. If that happens, you can bet that this country can kiss our financial industry goodbye. That's my layman's view. But we wait to see. I don't think that the UK can get this done. I know that the larger countries have told the US, Canada, and I think China has told the US, look, beneficial ownership and this that is going on can't work. But we wait and see.
For our listening audience, what is your perspective on the type of administration that is in place in the United States? And when I say that, I mean if there is a Democratic-led administration as opposed to a Republican-led administration, is there a different approach to how businesses should operate? Do you find that the Republicans are more pro-business than the Democrats? What have you found in your experience?
Well, see, over my time in government, I have opted not to be talking about the governance of other countries. I mean, democratic countries, where there are definite despotic regimes and coups and so on. Well, the whole world talks about it. But when we come to democratic administrations, in the region, I stay away from parties particularly. I know people in most islands, in all islands in our region. I think I'm acquainted with all the leaders. I know people from both sides, from both parties, and both parties do good over the years. Some strive better than others, and so I stay away from parties and making any comments that anybody could count negative on our region. Because I think that's the best way to do as a long-serving parliamentarian. And that's an old-time view, I would say, but that's the view I take also. In the United States, we have always said that the Republicans favor our business here in Cayman better than the Democratic Party. Both parties have done good things in the United States. Some have been harsher to Cayman. One side has been harsher to Cayman. But it's like the UK. At times we thought that the Labour Party was bad until the Conservatives come in. And we said, it's time for change. And the Labour Party, the Democratic Party, the Conservative Party would be much more amenable to the Commonwealth, because the Labour Party didn't pay the Commonwealth much mind, and particularly the overseas territories, except to send us what they want us to do and tell us what they want to do. Well, the Conservatives have done worse things since they've come in, as far as I'm concerned. They've done some good things too. So, as I said, I stand to stay away from the parties as in other countries. But in the United States, Democrats, good party, Republican, a good party also, but the Republican Party favors our business model much more than the Democratic Party.
Okay. Sir, on the one of the articles in today's Caymanian Compass speaks about the budget records being error-ridden. And when you take a quick glance at that, you get the impression that there are errors throughout the budget. Can you explain and describe to our audience what you have found so far?
From my perspective, I picked up most of these in questioning. I think much more important, and before I get to that, I can't say that what is affecting the bottom line. Last night, the deputy governor's one was saying to be 1.3 last year, and this budget says 200 and something, and so that's a drastic change. And when we check into last year, they spent 300 and something, which was budgeted for last year. The budget is showing 1.1 million last year, so which is right. They've said that's an error. So I don't know. What I've said as the opposition leader, I've said to the finance minister, whom I must give credit to, that we need to make sure that these things are not affecting the bottom line. Now, there was one that was, when they start to try to explain it, I can't remember which one that was, but that was a big one. it was okay. I think that was the SEMA one, where they're saying it's going to take $6 million, but only $3 million. And they say they can take $3 million from their revenue, and that will make up the $6 million.
So that would mean that $3 million less would then go into government's coffers?
Well, as I said, I found that quite a bit nebulous in its explanation. Maybe the government can do a better job in explaining it if they come on. But certainly, I found it quite strange that in your budget, if you're going to spend $3 million, $6 million, that you're only saying it's $3 million. Certainly, I thought you would show $6 million, even if you have it accounted somewhere else, that item itself would be showing $6 million. Anyway, they're saying, look, it's accounted for elsewhere. I have no way of challenging that. I don't like to do that because I'm not sure.
And we hope that there'll be some clarity to that in today's Finance Committee meeting, that they will have that clarified, you think?
Well, they as far as they're concerned, we passed that budget and that aspect of the budget, and I don't think we will get back on there. And I think that, what they have said to us, we have to take as being so. In the end, we'll find out a year from today. More disconcerting to me are the measures, and the budget system, or see the measures and the things that you're expecting the civil servants to do. When you see the cuts in the civil service vote and what they're expecting them to do, it is not. I don't know how the civil service is going to get that done. And when you ask the question, well, we have to do more with less. Yeah, that's easy to say, and that's very pleasing to the private sector to hear.
It's a good cliche.
Yeah, it's very good, but the actualities are different, and we know that. When it came to the tourism budget, every time I went to the tourism budget, the one thing that they want to cut, you don't need all this advertising, you got to cut this, that's too much. Well, I took it down from 30-odd million to $19 million in over this rough period of time. But in that time, the truth is we did increase tourism 12% over the last 12 years. Mm-hmm. So on a high over the last 12 years. So, the tourism department under Mr. Shamari and those girls there now, Richards and Rosa, and all the staff, I'm just naming leading ones, they worked hard, and they're still hardworking. We found out that they were cutting television. Now, we can talk about social media and how that can help, but the fact is that you cannot beat that television advertising. And when we came off of that, we found so, and when we went back on, we saw the difference.
There are those who question whether or not the Cayman Islands government itself needs to invest so much in advertising, and whether or not our private sector partners, the hotels, the condos, should be more involved in that, or at least contributing towards that. I do know that government even has some difficulties at times collecting the room taxes from those establishments as well. What's your viewpoint on that?
As I said, over the years, I've heard that all the time. Being on the backbench and while I was minister, that we should get the private sector to help. And the private sector would tell you, and that's one thing the minister says, no, where he's cut down, the private sector would pick up. Yes, in getting hotels like the Westin, and we had to keep that, we had to save that, if you might remember, in 2011, I think it was, and Marriott the same way. In getting those, we had to save them, and people. My biggest problem in government is I didn't do what I'm doing now. I'm coming here. I came, but not as often. I didn't make it a weekly trek to get on the radio, and now you find that this administration, every corner you look, you see a camera. So, and then they got people writing down what you say in the house. So they're doing a good job of recording and getting out what they want to get out. That was my problem. But we had to save them 2 hotels. And then we took big criticism for the Ritz. And still taking big criticism, even to government, and I don't think that the last $6 million they wrote off should have been, but That's what happened. But in getting those kind of properties, the better properties you get, the better they are going, the less the Cayman Islands can spend, because those properties are they have their own clientele. And so they are major properties. The one in East End, two in East End, let's say, doing more or less the same thing. And Moritz has done a fantastic job, and the Thompsons coming along since that have done a good job in theirs.
And Moritz continues to expand.
Moritz continues to build, and that's one that Cayman Islands need to always put their foot with, to walk hand in hand with. But in getting hotels like the Ritz, we Caymanians complain, oh, what are you doing in this hotel? You're not getting nothing out of it, you're not getting out of it. At the same time, they come and say, you shouldn't be spending money, they should be spending money. If you get 2 and 6 months hotels, that's what you will get, 2 and 6 months. You get $1 million hotel, you're going to get $1 million service. And the Ritz is one of those. So we can stand back. They have their own clientele, and that's the one thing that I said between 2000 and 2005. The Ritz is going to bring a different clientele. The Ritz is going to go after their people. They're going to make sure that their clientele come to their hotel. So we can sit back a bit, because they will do that.
Folks, you're listening to For the Record. My guest with me this morning is the Honorable W. McKeever Bush, Leader of the Opposition, MLA from West Bay. We're going to break for the news. Stay tuned to Radio Cayman 89.9 FM. When I come back, we will talk to Mr. Bush about social services, children and family services, and those persons who are falling through the social safety net. Thank you. We'll be right back. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. My guest with me this morning is Honorable W. McKeever Bush, Leader of the Opposition and MLA from the District of West Bay. We have our phone lines open, so if you want to call, if you have any questions, any observations, you can call us on 1-800-534-8255 or 949-8037. Mr. Bush, when I did my introduction earlier, I spoke about your involvement when you were a minister for, I believe it may have been sports and social services, and your involvement and drive towards helping those families who found themselves falling through the social safety net. We have seen as the years progress and as our population increases, and of course with the economic downturn and everything else, we've seen the numbers in terms of those persons who fall through the social safety net increasing. We have seen where the Children and Family Services have said that they will be enforcing a more rigorous process as far as vetting their clients is concerned. We have heard the Minister Tibbetts mention the possibility of installing spigots in the various districts for those persons who need potable water. We're not sure how that will work as well. We have seen the dilemma in West Bay where houses have to be demolished and rebuilt. We see the need for social housing in the Cayman Islands. I know that's a lot that I'm throwing out there, but the broader issue is those persons who are finding themselves falling through the social safety net are more vulnerable. That's
the main issue in Cayman today. The main issue is that people don't have work. Quick synopsis, OC, is that, look, when the economy was moving along and we didn't have Cayman, you talk about Cayman coming in more and more into the world. And internationally, that we have to do these things, so many different things. Well, that's true because of what we are. People are expecting us to be accountable, more open, more transparent. Our accounts need to be up to date, and so on. But the big problem we have is the economy. People not working, people not getting money. And more, it's more difficult for the economy to get started after the world crash because of some our own fault and some that things that we have been pushed on us from the UK. And those things are bureaucracy, bureaucracy, bureaucracy. People came here years ago, they built the country, and I say they built the country because we never had no money. We allowed them to come in, we worked with them, we worked together, and they put their money up, and that helped us, all of us, from nothing, from outside toilet to inside toilets, good bathroom, good homes, okay, and all the necessary facilities. And what happens? They ran from their country. They could have invested their money in their country, but they ran, and so they invested their money here, and Caymanians benefited. Caymanians could today, we complained about people back some years ago running from one job to the next, running from one job to the next. Well, you know what? That was a type of a person that was doing that. That person didn't stay on a job long. They went today here, 2 days, 3 days they work, and then they went off somewhere else because they could get a job. Now, they can't do that. And we know that that type of person was not the university educated person or the better educated person. So, and they grew up with a certain mentality. And as I said, they worked, but they went to work 2 days, 3 days a week, but they worked. And so government didn't have to put out as much. Today, those persons on top of others have piled up now, and they can't work. They got no money. The situation is, we made it so bureaucratic that businesses where we could get start business have not started for political reasons and for bureaucratic reasons. And so the economy is still flat. And more costs have built up because the people that complain, and it's such a mix up, I got to put it that way, that the private sector complains about government spending money, but government has to spend money to keep the private sector current as well. As you see today in today's paper, that SEMA don't have enough staff to keep regulation. What was regulation? They're not regulating government. They're regulating the private sector. But we have allowed so much bureaucracy that is necessary, and the world is demanding some of that. So some of it we can't get out of. Some of it we've gone overboard with. And there are those in the private sector that will say that in the finance industry, we shouldn't be doing some of the things because the bigger country, we have simply allowed the bigger country, UK, US, and others, to push us where they're not doing things, but we're in competition with them. So they push us, and every time they push us, we're a step away from getting more business, and they're 2 steps towards getting the business. And our people then are, at the end of the day, all of that, with us putting on costs, adding on costs here and there to keep us, sort of trying to keep us level, we're still disadvantaging others. Last night, a young lady came to me, a civil servant. No water, no electricity, 3 children, a single parent, not that she was married. But I want to say, that's not the only civil servant that has come to me in recent times. You got those that can't pay their rent. And I think that there is something radically wrong when a public servant of the country, and you're not talking about the private sector now or the private individual, a public servant who's given their time and efforts to government, not making enough, not getting enough to be able to satisfy her daily needs for small children.
And we're not, it's not like people are saying that they're entitled to it. We're not an entitlement society where people are saying that. These are people who want to work, have had jobs, and for one reason or the other, because I spoke to someone quite recently also, and that person stopped working after they had a child, and now we're looking for a job, unable to get a job, has difficulty in terms of lunch, for school lunches for the children, and those are things that we need to take care of, and I will be discussing them more here, and I hope to have some of those people who are involved in programs like Feed Our Future Cayman to talk about what access people can have, because what we need to understand, and you people out there need to understand as well, there are many Caymanians who are in need, but because of their upbringing and because of their history of being independent, find it extremely difficult to go to government, to go to children and family services to seek help. And then there are others who feel that if they go there, those persons who are assessing them and are questioning them, they don't necessarily identify with them, and they feel that they're being put through a stressful situation because of the system that we have in place. So we need to talk to the people at Children and Family Services as well to find out what's going on there and to ensure that it isn't just a perception, or that maybe it's just a perception as opposed to what is actually taking place.
Yeah.
Because many of our people are suffering simply because they don't, they're too proud to go, or they feel intimidated when they go to seek help.
And you see, some people would want me to sit here and talk about what caused it and how do you deal with it. Well, there's a place for that, but there's a place also to talk about what I'm talking about, the realities that people are facing, the actuality. There is there are several reasons why there are people not working. But just look at the situation. If people are not working because of a bad economy, and you got blue-collar workers, but now you got white-collar, you got college graduates coming back that are not getting jobs. Now, that's got to be a serious thing. We can't move from one decade where we're saying, look, we've been told you must educate your child. And most of us as parents did all we can to educate our children. Some of us had two that we had to do, and no assistance from government. And we had to do what we can to try to get them educated. That's why I took a position that no matter who that child is, no matter where they come from, I was going to find a way to help them. And some would get more than others, but I was going to try to help children. But there is also a situation, what Adlai Stevenson, who was a great Democrat, and I think in the 60s a Democratic presidential candidate. He talked about rising expectations. And so as our students come back, as they graduate, as they get a degree, they're not, from what I hear, some of them not expecting to start at the bottom. Because they got a degree, they want to start in middle management or elsewhere. So they're not expecting to start at the lower level. That is some. Okay? Now that's the rising expectation, because that's don't happen in the world that we live in today, because the world has changed too. But then you must expect that those that went to university, those that went to college will want a job. And that is not happening. Now, that's in the white collar, much less the poor ones in the blue collar who are at the very lower ends. Construction and all of this. I mean, people are hurting, and we can talk about what are the causes. I sit here and say some of the causes, and that's a quick synopsis and probably in bad English when I talk about where we came from, how we got there, right, and what people are expecting. But those are the facts.
But there are those who will say, if you look in the newspapers every day in the want ads, we will find that there are jobs that are advertised. There are some simply not white-collar jobs, but blue-collar jobs, and yet we still have Caymanians unemployed. And how do you explain that dilemma?
Well, I hear them cussing the status grants. Oh, the status grants made us the worst things in the world. I mean, I heard one legislator get up and say that the status grants were the cause for the gangs. I mean, I don't know which world he's living in. But that is not the evidence. The evidence that it's our own people. And I said, with status grants and Cayman, and who got Cayman status are our people. But if they want to differentiate, it's not those people. And some time ago we checked, they said, oh, they were the one getting the social service benefits. We checked with social services in finance committee, I think up until last year, and they said, no. These are Caymanians we're talking about that needs this help. It's not about status grants. You might find some of them, yes, because that will happen. We could go on and on. In the private sector with those people out there, a lawyer, a young lady, fantastic girl, good experience, been abroad, working, very meticulous thinker, and she tried to get a job. Couldn't get one. 2 jobs was open in one law firm. I called them up. No. I could lead into another story talking about interference, right? Because if I'm a representative and you come to me and say, the development bank, can you speak to somebody? I'm not going there and sit around the table and say, do this, do that, do that, do this. I'm saying, I have a constituent. Can you help them? And that's as far as I go. But they say that's interference, that's wrong. But what in the world should I do as a politician? What should I do? What should the constituent do? Shouldn't they contact me?
Yeah, and you're merely referring them.
That's all. And I'm trying to find out if there is a situation, something that I don't know. Because remember, constituents would come in and tell you one side of their story while there's another one. So you have to find out. You don't go down there and sit down on the table and say, this must be granted, that must be granted. Anyway, you have to call up people. So I call up people as a representative. Yes, I was a premier, but I was still an elected representative. And I call them up and say, you got 2 jobs. Oh, yes, send them over and we will talk them. Yeah, over. And they made their application. The jobs were advertised. Said, no, this is you're more qualified. We don't need you because you're overqualified. And so that young lady said, but I will take the job. Because I can do it. Yes, I'm overqualified, but I can do the job. And I need to work or I'm going to lose my house. I have my children. No, didn't. The next one, she didn't get that one either. And what they said to me was that, again, well, she was overqualified. I don't buy that argument. Look, a student can have a master's degree in finance, but if they can't get a job and they want the work, and they can get one doing something else, and they want to take it, then they should be given the job, they're given that opportunity, unless there's something wrong with that person. They can't read, they can't write, they can't understand. You can't teach them, they can't be leader. What's wrong? They got a bad work ethic. Well, you do know that, particularly when they got a glowing report from their last employer. So what is the problem in these things?
Yeah, and I don't want to sound divisive or anything, but we have to face the reality and look at situations, and we see, even in the legal profession and within government itself, government's legal department, we see people come, they move up through the ranks, possibly because of hard work and everything else, and they excel, some to the point where they become judges in other jurisdictions as well. But we don't seem to see the Caymanians in that legal profession, especially in the government's legal department, moving up the way that we should. When we look yesterday, I was online looking at Turks and Caicos News, and I see it in our local paper today. Justice Margaret Ramsey Hill has now become the Chief Justice in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and all well to her and good, and I congratulate her for that. But there is a classic example again of coming from the family courts in Jamaica, coming over to the Cayman Islands, becoming a chief magistrate here, moving over as one of the high court judges in the Turks and Caicos, and eventually becoming Chief Justice. We need to see more of that happening for our Caymanians here, especially in the legal profession, and we're not seeing it in government. And the reason could be that maybe it's more attractive out in the private sector and they don't want to do the government work, but I know from experience there is the ability for you to move up the ladder if you put your nose to the grindstone and you work hard. And it can be done.
That's a big issue when it comes to the government that I don't have time to get into this morning. But and I certainly want to take the minute to congratulate Margaret. She's been a friend. I know her. She's been a good family person, and I congratulate her. But do you know that there are Turks Islanders that say, well, why wasn't it one of our own? Now, the ones that I know that say this, nobody in government, this is private citizens, say, well, why haven't one of our own Turks Island risen to that height? So they question it too. They're saying, she not Turks Islander, you know. She Caymanian Jamaican. And I say, yes, but she is, she came there and she rose to that. I said, yeah, we're not saying that. We're saying she's still not one of us. And so she got the job. So they complain the same way people complain here. Well, I can congratulate her, and I told them, I said, she worked hard to get to where she's at.
Folks, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. My guest is the Leader of the Opposition, Honorable W. McKeever Bush. We're talking about various subjects. We're going to take a quick commercial break because we have to pay the bills. When we return, I know the Leader of the Opposition wants to talk about the Alexander Hotel in Cayman Brac and about issues there. Stay tuned.
I will close off with a few things. Huh?
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I told you we'd be right back, and that was a real quick break. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. My guest is the Honorable W. McKeever Bush, Leader of the Opposition and MLA from West Bay. Mr. Bush?
Yes, we were talking about the situation with workers. And I congratulated Margaret on her appointment, her hard work over the years, and good work here in several areas.
No, the drugs courts and stuff like that.
Made an improvement in her time.
Huge
Palm the
improvement.
court, yes.
Yeah.
Like I tell you, she was very understanding. But as I said, there are people up there that complain about Turks Island and not getting a job either. But what I'm finding here, O.C., is that the worker have no advocate. No advocacy go on for them. When I fought for labor rights in the 80s, there was nothing. We had a law called the truck law and the law of the masters and servants law, which was a slave law. That's what we was operating under. There was no certification, there was no time, there was no pregnancy benefits. It was all left up to the employer. You had no right to get that. Well, some people pushed me to push for unions, and I said, no. Look, when you look around, at that point in time, 30 years ago, the unionism was still strong in the region to the extent that it was disruptive. Now, not that it didn't do some good things in some areas, because it did, but it still wasn't where I thought we should be. And so I pushed for the employee, the employer, and the government, a tripartite system that would sit down and discuss this thing. And it worked for a time. But for 30 years, now it's strange. The worker is the one out. Government has filled up with bureaucracy, so many committees that they can't get cases dealt with properly. And so at the end of the day, the one that is disadvantaged is the worker. Now, you have associations of every kind. And what those associations are, while they strive to do different things, many of them are protective of themselves and their members. The chamber being the biggest one. And that's the one that will fight anything when it comes to workers' rights. They have in the past, at least. If they change their MO now, I don't know. But I can tell you the fight that McKeever... That's why I made enemies in Georgetown. Because I fought for the workers' right. And they can't say so because I have the records of the letters that the moguls up here wrote. I have the reports from the Chamber of Commerce, how much they criticized me and called me communist. Because I fought for workers' rights. There had to be some right for the worker. People today, that year old, 35 years old, will not know the struggle that people like me had to get them the rights.
And do we wait until we're embarrassed internationally in terms of the wages and the way that we treat people? If we look, for instance, at a country like Qatar, who will be hosting, I think it's the World Cup in 20. What do we in another 8 years? They will be hosting, I think, the World Cup, and we already see stories coming out of there where, because they're starting to build their infrastructure for the World Cup, we're starting to see reports about those expatriate workers who are underpaid there, and it's starting to come out, and it's going to have an effect on donors there and people who invest there. So do we wait for that to happen in the Cayman Islands?
And it's going to happen. And so I recently called for an association of workers, not just Caymanian workers, all workers, to come together. And I think they can help themselves. They can help themselves. We're not just talking about wages. We're talking about educating the worker to the less knowledgeable worker to say, listen, friend, you get a job, you be thankful. Remember, you got a boss. Remember, if you got to be work at 8 o'clock, you got to be there at 8 o'clock. Remember, if you have to work 8 hours a day, you got to be there. Remember, if you got to work 7 days a week, then you should plan that. If you can't work 7 days a week, then you ought to plan that, and you ought to know, right? Those sorts of things. I mean, planning, educating, making workers understand their employer needs, and to at the same time because commerce has to go on. The Bible tells you that you have to make money to be able to pay money. For somebody to make money, somebody has to make money.
Yep. The person isn't employing you just because they want to employ you.
That's right. So there is a place now in this country. If not, it's going to blow up. It's going to blow up. There's a place now for advocacy of workers, and the workers need to do this. I don't need to do so as a politician, and I don't think that politicians need to do so. Would-be politicians or elected members, because man, it's not just elected members that are politicians. You got some real rough ones out on the side out there watching and sitting down waiting. So I now want to start something. I don't want to be involved in it. I want the educated young person who's come back from college, have seen the problems, those that are working in the industry, that know the problem, they see it. And there are many cases. I think workers here are being disadvantaged now in many instances, and that we don't want to talk about, and people don't expect me to talk about. Over the years, I have been pro-business because, as I said, I believe that the business has to make money, or else there can't be any money go anywhere for anywhere. You can't employ, you can't do anything if the business is not making money. So I have been pro-development, I have been pro-worker, I have been pro-business, but I do not want to be the one that is out there in the front leading this, because politics being what it is, politics will creep in, and we don't want politics per se to be in the midst of this advocacy.
Well, like how we've seen the government establish a committee in Cayman Brac to deal with development in Cayman Brac.
Yeah.
Would you, if you were in government, would you propose something similar to that to deal with working conditions, working relationships, and stuff like that?
Being able to step back now and see some of the situations, because when you, for instance, in being premier for 4 years, you got you're the head person, you're the head salesman for the country. You got to travel, you got to deal with your own ministries, and you're in upfront only to some people to be shot. That's all they think you're there for. If you're talking about that motion, you know that I piloted that motion, and so yes, certainly. Being able to step back and see some of the needs and listen more to people and hear constituents, which I did before as well, but you got more time now as a leader of an opposition to understand the situation. Certainly there needs to be that done. If you take Cayman Brac has its own setup, and while we're pouring money into Cayman Brac, there are smart people in Cayman Brac that can sit down and say, no, we've been here long enough in Cayman Brac. We know the situation. We know the labor situation. We know the marine situation. We know our environment. So they can deal with it. Let them deal with it. In Cayman, you would set up committees to do similar situations. Yes, for labor, if you just take labor alone. Yeah, but I don't need to sit down. I don't need a committee to tell me whether I need a minimum wage. Okay, and I would be wary of who I'm putting on the minimum wage, because I have had that experience. I have, as I said, I worked side by side with the chamber over the years, and what I got kicked in the face. And if you see them, I have been the one that they will attack. I have been the one, my administration has been the one, and me has been the one that they will attack, that they will say things about, and that they will make fun of all things. They will do it.
I know you want to talk about the Alexander Hotel. Folks, you're listening to For the Record. My guest this morning is the Honorable W. McKeever Bush, leader of the opposition, MLA from the District of West Bay. I know on other shows you have spoken about the Alexander Hotel, and I think you want to elaborate here as well.
There's this investigation at the airport that I ought to speak about briefly. But I am dismayed, disgruntled. I'm torn up over the fact of the duplicity in this country. We agreed about how the way forward, and if you look at the process used in Cayman Brac, the government say we support, but when they say that to pacify a situation up there, you watch how things was done, and you knew that they were sidestepping the issue, and there were other plans. At the same time that was going on, there were 2 applications and a property under contract in Cayman Brac. 2 applications for marinas, same thing. Now, Cleveland's Marina, Dilbert's Marina we call it, is a well-planned marina. Their channel is an S channel with a big curve in it. It's out there in the rock, it's not beach. It's on the upper end of, and below that is the sandy area and where the main tourism resorts are on the beach side in Cayman Brac, the only beach in Cayman Brac where they're going to put one of those marinas. So they're not concerned about the erosion of the beach there. But Cleveland's Dilbert's Marina, and I heard about some of the blogs, and I wish I had some time to deal with some of those scruffs, because that's what they are. They get on there and say all sorts of things that point fingers and accuse people. But make me say, OC, that when Cleveland built his hotel, I knew about it. A caller. I'll take the calls. You need to deal with it.
I'm made to understand that we have one caller online, and we always promise that we're going to take our calls once they come in. Good morning, caller. Welcome to For the Record. Go right ahead and speak, please.
Good morning to you, Mr. O.C. Good morning to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Bush.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
I don't want to take much of your time and listen. It's a strange coincidence that that's what they're talking about on the other show also, Mr.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. And they have the Minister of Environment on there. And Mr. Dilbert just called in also. Talking, quite interesting. You're speaking earlier on about like an advocacy group. I would say, let's say a labor union, I guess that's what you're...
That's what they would term it. But I first of all, I want to say, though, sir, that I think there's a difference in what I'm advocating and an outright union. Yet there's some formalities to organization. Yes. Okay.
I know. I have been in unions, and they do serve a great purpose, because people think it's just to get involved and argue with employers over wages and strike, and that's not really it, because they go for health purposes, they go for everything, and that's why they were really started. It's terrible, the global conditions in the huge countries. But I disagree with you one thing with that. It's not going to get anywhere at all if some well-known elected representatives, I rather use that word on politician, but so be it, but gets involved and leads it. Because if I know you know your Caribbean history of great famous politicians, they all were union leaders. And the number one of all, Alexander Bustamante. Mm-hmm. That's what he was, because he recognized the plight of the masses, his people, and that's what made him so well known. And you know, with yourself, one of the main reasons is that the most powerful union here, the employers' union, is against anything really. We have seen it over the years. So what I'm saying is nothing more, of course, it's my opinion, what I'm talking, than the people would be victimized if some politician, let's go back to that word now, doesn't stand up and sort of lead that charge. It doesn't have to be any formalized union, as you're saying, but leads that group, that advocacy group. In my opinion, it's not going to get anywhere. There's too much power in the powerful private sectors. We notice they've tended to focus all the attention on, for years now, on politicians, on their rights and their business and their whatever they're doing, but never on the private sector and whatever they're doing. They've tended to shift everybody's focus onto our elected representatives, the only voice the people have, and try to put everything in a bad light, as we see every day. But I just feel it won't get off the ground at all without some personal political stature and an elected person. Thank you very much for giving me the time.
Thanks for that observation too, sir. Thank you very much.
He's very observant, knows his regional history and other, I mean, I've heard him on the radio about many things, and very, very observant, and in fact, very correct. I still
always has something positive to contribute. And
he does. In this matter, as I said, I want to get it started. I want to make sure it happens, but I believe that we have good educated people that can take it, and strong enough personalities to lead. Now, if that fails, because the complete's not going to stop, then I believe we must act. And I am committed to that.
Okay. You want to talk about the civil
yes.
aviation?
When Cleveland started his hotel, the government promised him that they would help him. They would make sure that situation, because he didn't know about the pond, and he did in the meantime that he built it. When we opened it, Moses, the deputy premier, stood with me there in the opening, because by then I was the minister, and he said that they would do what they can to help Cleveland keep the hotel going, and they would do something about that. I made specific reference to it, and Moses did. Moses still says today that he wants to help, but he cannot be shut down by the Minister of the Environment alone. People got to understand, his members got to understand this. They cannot be shut down by one minister. No. So it's not that Cleveland didn't know, and not that he went into it blindly. He knew, but he was promised. And he was good enough to go and build a 30-room hotel. What we all agreed that Cayman back didn't need a big hotel. Need these kind of good properties, and nobody can say that Alexander is not a good property. One thing you got to say about Cleveland is that when he do something, he do it meticulously, he run it meticulously, and yes, it's a family, but we have to be proud of Caymanian families that he can raise 4 children or 3 sons, whatever, and that they don't have to depend on government. That he can put his money in. I mean, that's one that government don't have to take care of. Shouldn't we be proud of that?
Precisely.
No matter where their political loyalties lie. The truth is, I don't think they ever supported me. But the fact is, I've always admired his business acumen and the way that he came up, because he came from poor family too. So, you hear all sorts of things, but you never want to give people credit. Getting back to the situation, he built it. He came up with this idea now. He put all the things in place that they ever asked about for a marina. He put up the seawall. He make it so that if a wave come in, that it will have less impact. He's going to put proper walls around the surrounding properties. All the surrounding properties are going to increase in value. All the surrounding properties have agreed except one and maybe another one. But their walls are going to be built. If a hurricane comes that is strong enough, it's going to do what is done here in Cayman. It's going to come over us, and we can't do anything about that. Okay. We can't do anything about it, but we can mitigate it. The differences are that this government has allowed 2 more and has rejected his based on I think the flimsies of excuses which cannot withhold in any situation. They're not true, they're not right, and I think they've gone back doorways to do things that will stop the man from and make him lose now his investment. They've given this lady, who is not hiring Caymanians, if you talk to Cayman Brackers, she got 30 people and they're all work permits, and while I support whatever it's doing because they can still bring revenue to Cayman back, it still will. So I support it. But if you take the marina on the north side, it's right alongside the cemetery on the west end. So any drilling, blasting can have effect on the cemetery. They're not going to they're not been required to do any seawall. None. And while the winds and seas prevail out of the east, the day it comes from the north, they're not protected. They will have a little protection, albeit that dock, which they say will protect it some 800 feet, that's a lot of space for water to come in. So I say they don't really have the protection that they're saying. But I still support it. Because we got to get something going, and you got to give something to get something. But also, it's within 500 or 600 feet of the MV Captain Keith Tibbetts, the main dive site, plus 2 more dive sites. Okay, how many strikes against them now? Besides that, they're not. And the next big one is, and these are things that the Department of Environment rejects applications for coastal works licenses. These things that I'm talking about, they always reject it, always against it. Now
They normally make a recommendation to cabinet in terms of the proposal, whether or not they
don't support it.
They support or not, but they don't really have the ability to reject it.
But they go against it. Yeah. But now the cabinet is saying based on
the recommendation,
based on their support, they're going ahead with this. The main thing here now that DOE always objects to is that they don't support any construction, coastal work license, whatever, in a marine park. And the north one is in a marine park. Okay? Now, that is how bad it is. As far as I'm concerned, that's how dirty it is. Now, on the south side, that next one is going in the main tourism district. I mean, you got a marina going in there, you got a swim hole, they call it, swim lagoon, and the marina going inside alongside. I mean, how's that going to work? Yeah. Swimming and that.
This is certainly a topic that we would want to discuss in more detail. Of course, time does not allow us to do so. Folks, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor. We're on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We have scheduled for this coming Monday, the 23rd, Minister Tara Rivers, who should be here to talk about education and employment. We have with us the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, McKeeva Bush. Mr. Bush, we got 1 more minute for you to be able to wrap up. I know you didn't get to another subject, but we'll get to it next week.
The next subject is that scandalous investigation and massive cover-up that is taking place at the airport, on the airport investigation on the use of the airport's IT equipment for 1,600 open up 1,600 porn sites and the visits to those porn sites 450 times. And how we sat there from 3 something yesterday till about 9:30 last night. It's about 6 hours, and some behind closed door. And matters that I consider a very serious abridgment of my rights as an elected member of the House and that of my constitutional office of the Leader of the Opposition. The truth was not told in that committee by witnesses under question. They sent one of the employees to get a letter that they said didn't exist, but they sent him, and he came back and said no, he couldn't get a letter. But they could. When I told them they better get, because there was a copy of the letter, they could not produce. They produced a half letter. Then we got them to produce a full letter, and now they're going to consider that. So I cannot be told by anyone that something did not exist and that the board was not party to gross interference by ordering the serious investigation be concluded and the staff member be brought back to work. The board interfered, and they must accept that they interfered and it was gross interference. This is absolutely wrong. If it was your child, somebody else's child, it would suffer. But in Cayman, the slave mentality exists. What's good for one can be good for another. There's a certain class that gets preference, and they always do it right. They are the ones that must be treated right. Your child, my child, McKeeva Bush, they are the bad people. Treat them wrong. No. We must be fair, and we must treat all things equal.
Something that we will need to look at on one of our next shows, certainly. Mr. Bush, I want to thank you for appearing as our guest again today, your regular spot on Fridays. We want to thank you, the listening audience.
I want to say this, just one minute. Just give me 1 minute, Radio Cayman. I'm not here to destroy anybody's children. I know what it means for people to pounce on your family and pounce on me. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is there has to be fairness, has to be equal treatment across the board, OC. That's what I want to see.
Understood. Folks, thanks for listening in. You're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. We will be back on again on Monday morning when we will have Minister Tara Rivers on our show. I ask you to perform a random act of kindness today. Remember those who are more needy in our society. We are our brother's keeper. We have to take care of them. Thank you and have a great weekend.
Get the economy going. Stop complaining about this project and the next project.